The Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer Research Grant was set up in 2019 to honor an extraordinary individual, Jennifer Oppenheimer, who was passionate about Africa and contributed hugely to science on the continent and beyond. She was a massive supporter of natural history and conservation in Africa. Sadly, she died at an early age, at 50. The grant is one of many vehicles that is there to continue her legacy. Since its inception 4 years ago, this annual award has supported groundbreaking African research programs with the potential to significantly contribute to the advancement of environmental and allied sciences through identifying and addressing real-world issues across the continent. The focus has been on supporting the next generation of African scientists, specifically early career African scientists. We have initially felt that the award should only be open to individuals that were born on the continent. However, we felt that perhaps we were too restrictive. And so we've edited it in some ways. So one should have a strong African heritage, or at least view yourself as an African scientist. Then one obviously could still apply. We've decided to be a little more lenient with regards to age. Previously, only applicants who had received their PhD within 7 years were eligible to apply. However, we have decided to accommodate men and women who had taken a career break or had a break to have children. So importantly, this award is for individuals who are still in the early stages of their career. We are also looking for a program that is not extremely well funded already, a program where this funding will make a massive difference to you and making this program work. As mentioned, this grant is intentionally focused on Africa and not just Southern Africa. I think that's an important point to make. Impact is at the heart of what this grant is trying to achieve. And we've been hugely successful over the past 3 years in attracting fantastic, diverse, and quality applications. I mean, last year alone, we had 272 applications submitted from 27 countries. This year, we are trying to expand our reach and encourage even more applications from across Africa. Applications are assessed by a distinguished and hugely engaged expert panel, a group of individuals from a diverse array of backgrounds, specializations, skills, opinions, and views. We have extensive and robust discussion around what this award stands for and what we are trying to achieve. Just to make it clear, this is a once-off $150,000 US over 3 years, and not $150,000 US per year. So the total budget is $150,000 US. What we are looking for, we're looking for applied research that pushes the boundaries and frontiers of knowledge. There should be a large, scalable program with numerous collaborators on the continent and even globally, and which clearly profile the different networks of the program and the lead of that program. We're looking for African solutions, as I said, to real-world problems. This is a science award, so a lot of focus is on scientific rigor and excellence, which we feel are vitally important for the personal program that wins this award. We give preference to applicants which provide a clear indication of human capital development. So in essence, large, expansive programs which are transdisciplinary in nature stand a better chance of success. Be explicit, be clear on the problem or the challenge that you want the research to answer. And in the concept note, be upfront. Provide the intended impact and practical outcomes of this work. Then, with regards to the process, You would have seen from the website, which I trust everybody would have heard a look at already, that on the 2nd of May, an online applications opened, and you have until the 27th of May this month to get your concept notes submitted. The first stage, which is currently open, and as I said, closes on the 27th of May, is the submission of a concept note of 200 words. We're looking for the lead and only the lead applicant to make that submission. It is important to provide a clear definition and scientific overview of the program, what the research entails, including how and what the impact is likely to be. The expert panel will then discuss these applications and come up with a long list, which will then feed into the second stage. Sadly, obviously, we get a huge number of applicants, as there's a huge amount of reading and capacity. Unfortunately, we can't respond to each person. So only those who have been successful will get a notice that they've been successful and that they'll go into the proposal stage. The second stage, briefly, is to submit a full proposal, as I said, by invitation only, and that will be sent out on the 4th of July. This includes a full technical proposal with a budget and work plan, and includes at that stage biographies, publication history, collaborators, and partner organizations. The full proposal is then due by the 1st of August at midnight. The shortlist stage will also require a video submission at this stage to be submitted, which will allow the lead applicant to talk about the merits of the project. Then the 3 shortlisted candidates after that will be invited for an interview, more likely on Zoom, to provide the subcommittee of the expert panel an opportunity to drill down into that program. The successful grant recipient will be notified on the 5th of September. The award, unlike last year and the year before, hopefully we'll have it at the Oppenheimer Research Conference. The Oppenheimer Research Conference, the 11th Oppenheimer Research Conference, should I say, it will be held between the 5th and 7th October in Midrand in South Africa. But I'll stop there. We have both Bernard Coetzee from the University of Pretoria and Gideon Idowu from the Federal University of Technology, Accra, the second and the third JWO recipients of 2020 and 2021 recipients, who will talk about their experiences, and then we'll open for a question and answer session at the end. Bernard, let's start with you. What advice can you give would-be applicants, applying for this prestigious grant?
Ooh, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Ken?
Ken?
Thank you, Duncan. That's a sweeping overview of the grant. I think it's a hard challenge to write a grant like this, right? But what I want you to think about as prospective applicants is to really like think out the box, think big, be bold. I think these grants are about perspective, and they're about a broader thinking of what we can do in Africa, and what we can do in the environment. And I hope that you can all
Have we lost Bernard?
We seem to have lost Bernard.
Okay, while Bernard gets back on, maybe Gideon, we can move to you.
Okay.
And Gideon was awarded the JWO award last year and is specializing in water and plastics. Over to you, Gideon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gideon Idowu, based at the Federal University of Technology, Akure. It's a privilege to be here to give some tips about the JWO application based on my experience of it last year. So I would like to start by saying, no doubt the JWO, the Jennifer World Oppenheimer Grant is perhaps one of the most prestigious funding available to African researchers at the moment. It's a huge support for science, and I would like to appreciate the Oppenheimer generation's research and conservation for this generous grant and huge support for science. It's a huge one. So for my advice to prospective applicants, I'll talk based on my experience from last year competition, as I said, which I happened to emerge as the winner. So the grant is for the sum of $150,000 over 3 years. It's really worth fighting for. So it's huge. It's going to make a lot of difference to your research career. So it's a huge one. It's really worth fighting for. It's worth putting in all your efforts into. So I'll start with the concept note stage, which is the initial application where you are asked to submit maybe 2 pages, just few pages to express your idea. And I think that's the most crucial stage of this competition. It's probably the most important because that's where most people get weeded out. That's where a lot of people get weeded out. So you want to really make sure you put in your best at this point. And if you ask me, I will give 2 attributes I consider very, very important, and that's quality and clarity. Quality. By quality, I mean how good the writing is, the write-up, how you are able to take your time to carefully present your idea in a way that it will be convincing, spending adequate time to really write down what you want to pass across. And then in doing that, you need to put in mind that you need to write for an average scientist. The assessors may not necessarily be experts in the particular field that you are writing about. So you need to, it's a scientific piece of writing, but at the same time, you want to write for an average scientist to be able to understand what you are talking about. And it might be very helpful to give to colleagues to read for you and get feedback from your own colleagues to see whether they are able to make sense of what you put out. So quality is important. Then clarity, being explicit within the limits of the number of words that you've got to do your concept, being clear, being writing down what exactly you want to communicate, making sure what you want to say is what you have actually said in your concept note is really important. And then to the main application, which is the where you provide the details of everything you proposed, it's really, really important. You want to give as much details as possible. At the same time, you also want to be concise. So I would like you to resist the pressure of having to exhaust the full word limit. You don't necessarily have to, if for instance, you've given 10,000 words for your main application, it doesn't mean that you have to write 10,000 words. So if you can do your write-up within 7,000 to 8,000 words and you are still able to write, present a good application, that's fine, it's perfect. In my own situation, I didn't have to write the entire 10,000, or I can't remember the figure, but I made sure I was able to really put in something good within the limits that is required. So being detailed and being concise is really important. If you can do something within 2 paragraphs, you don't need to write 4 paragraphs for it. So it's really important. Then I think showing relevance, the relevance of your proposed study to things like the Sustainable Developmental Goals, SDG is important, and also showing the impact, the potential impact of your research. You can imagine something over $150,000. I think the funding body will really need to know about what impact that would make to science in Africa. What solution are you trying to provide to the challenge that you have identified? So it's really important that you articulate clearly the impacts, the potential impacts of your proposed study, and then show clearly the relevance to things like SDG or Africa Agenda 2063. It's really important to show all of that. So then to your budgets, budget is an important aspect of any grant writing. So my advice is that you should be as detailed as much as possible. You want the funding body to know what exactly you want to spend the grant on. So it's important to be detailed and be realistic. Be realistic. So you want to be very realistic with what you want to do with the money. So that's important. You don't want to put anything frivolous there. So you want to be as realistic as well. And then linking that to your proposed work, linking your budget to your proposed work is also very, very important. Then in terms of your application, what you put in there, it's also important if you go past research funding, it's important that you include that as well and let it feature prominently in your application, because that tells the funding body that you've had experience of receiving and managing grants, that your institution has also had experience of receiving and managing grants in the past. I think that's very important. If you had that in the past, make sure you feature them prominently for the assessors to really see. And then at some point, you might be asked to do things like a video entry or video submission. You want to make sure you put in something of good quality. I would advise you that you take advantage of the technology. You can do a video recording with your mobile phone, but you need to ask yourself, is that actually the best you can get? Can you get something better? So it's important that you take advantage of technology in terms of any input you are making. At every stage, you should remember you are in competition with other applicants. You are in competition, so you want to make sure you put in something of good quality. Take advantage of technology. And then in terms of your team, putting together your team, if your research is multidisciplinary, which is what is expected of a grant of this magnitude, you want to make sure that every expertise that is required to successfully deliver the project is represented. So you might have expertise in one area, but because your research is multidisciplinary, you want to be sure that you have people that have expertise in all aspects. Let me say, in all objectives of your proposed study. You look at the objectives, you want to be sure you have expertise to deliver every objective in your proposal. That's actually very, very important. And then if you're lucky enough to make it to the stage of oral interview, which is close to the, like the penultimate, about the last thing that you might have to do, you want to be sure to articulate your views. You want to articulate your points clearly to the assessors. Make sure you present your proposal in a convincing manner today. And then, I think there's a way they read passion. They want to know maybe you are passionate about this, which it will be obvious, because if you're passionate about your research, it will be something that you have been doing for some time. It's something you actually have a burden for. It's something you really want to find solution to. And the assessors have a way of judging that. So they will read whether you are passionate about this, your proposed project or not. And I think that's very, very, very important. So I think that's the bit I've got. So I will wish you all the best in your applications. So hopefully I will look forward to seeing who emerges the next recipient for the 2022 JWO grant. Thank you very much.
Gideon, thank you very, very much. I think that was brilliant. And I think it really, really captured what we as an expert panel are looking for. So thank you for that. I think that was very, very valuable. Please, just a reminder to everyone on the call to please put your questions or in the chat box, and then we can put them to Gideon and Bernard at the end. I believe we have Bernard back.
We don't have him back yet.
Okay, well, that's no good. Great. Just, well, I mean, from an expert panel perspective, I mean, Gideon touched on so many important issues, and absolutely passion is something we certainly are looking for. You know, one can easily tell, you know, whether a lead researcher is passionate about their subject, engaged in their subject. So that is very, very important. And again, clear, concise, to the point, easily understood. Bear in mind, the expert panel is a bunch of experts, but experts in different things. So it has to appeal to a broad range. It needs to be easily understood, that the impact that research is going to have needs to be clear and needs to be clearly understood. I see just a question from Cormac, and I think I'll mention it. Yeah, I'm an Irish European citizen, but I've lived in South Africa since 2016, which is, you know, in essence, you know, 6 years or so. I've completed my PhD in the UKZN and 100% committed to African conservation, African research. My research life and career is solely in Africa. My collaborator is African, and am I still eligible to apply? And again, it's a thin line. I mean, you know, theoretically, only 6 years in the country, being an Irish European citizen, it's on the line, I'm afraid, Cormac. And, you know, we really want someone, you know, winning this with strong heritage in Africa and, you know, lived their full life, possibly. And so, you know, my feeling would be, I'm afraid not. Just going back to, you know, what we're looking for in terms of impact. You know, we say we want real world, you know, answers to real world problems. And I mean, we look at the past winners of this award. We had Hayley Clements, who was our first inaugural winner. You know, she was looking at biodiversity intactness in Africa. So looking at an index for environmental biodiversity intactness, and working with experts across the continent, per country, and working on, you know, where areas that are still intact from a biodiversity point of view are still there. Very clear, tangible impact, and then obviously, which will guide a lot of further research in that area. Bernard Coetzee, who hopefully we'll get back, looking at the impacts of artificial light as vectors, for vectors. You know, often one doesn't take into consideration that maybe the wrong type of light that one's using in Africa, in homes, in rural homes across the continent, are attracting malaria, and what's the prevalence across Africa. And of course, looking at the impact of light on biodiversity, specifically on invertebrates. And then Gideon, I mean, we still got you, so you could talk more on your own project, but looking very, very much so on plastics in water, and not only in fresh water, but then also in oceans. Gideon, do you want to just a few? Oh yeah, I've got a question here from Linus. Dr. Idowu talked about linking your budget to your proposal. How do you link your budget to your proposal? Is a question from Linus.
Okay, Linus, to your question, yeah. So linking your budget to your proposal, you know, in your proposal you have certain objectives, and then there are certain materials or equipment that you would need to actually achieve those objectives. So linking now, I'm talking about making sure what the items you have in your budget are things that will help you to achieve the objectives of the proposal. Like you want to do an experiment to achieve certain objectives, making sure that the particular equipment that you put down.
Sorry, Gideon. Sorry,
Okay.
David, you're not on mute. Okay, thanks, Gideon.
Okay, so you have objectives, and then you need certain equipment to achieve that objective. So you want to make sure that what you have in your budget are those specific equipment or materials that will help you to achieve the objective. So you don't want to write certain objectives or set of work to do, and then under budget, you are listing equipment that are not relevant to what you want to do. So that's what I mean. And well, it might be very helpful to the assessors if you do it objectives based on these objectives. These are the set of things that will be needed, and then you itemize them and put the necessary details as far as each item is concerned. Yep.
We just have a question from Perushin. She's asking whether there are any budget constraints in terms of building capacity within your project, in terms of funding on MSc stipends or funding for a student that will be on the project. Gideon?
No.
Hello. Okay. Do you want me to respond to that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. I don't think, I can't remember exactly, but I don't think there was any restriction in terms of how many MSc students or what you can fund. But I would just advise that in as much as the grant is expected to build capacity, but then you should have your budget in such a way that the bulk of the funding is going towards equipment and materials for the actual projects. Yes, I wouldn't have advised that you put so much money on paying things like tuition or or living expenses. That I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah.
And then a question directed at Duncan. If successful in getting the grant, are we able to use some of the funding for our stipend to cover our fellowship, or must it all be spent on research?
No, you certainly can use a certain amount that can be used to cover the stipend and living costs.
Okay, thank you, Duncan. And then we have a question from Karen Jordan. She says, for description of scientific solutions, do you require a short overview or methodology for the proposed project? Duncan, could you please take that one?
I mean, the concept note, that's where it all should be. I mean, that's very clearly laid out in the structure of what we're looking for, and it actually fixed numbers of words for what we're looking for. So methodologies can certainly come at a later stage in the full proposals.
Okay, thank you so much, Duncan. Linus is asking how you convincingly and properly articulate the impacts of your proposal for the project to the funders. I think this would be something that both Gideon and Duncan can answer. Duncan from a funder's perspective and Gideon from somebody who's been through the process.
Gideon, you go first.
Yeah, so how do you convincingly and properly articulate the impacts of your proposed project to the funders? I mean, that's part of what the assessors are assessing actually. So it is like asking, how do I convince the editor of a journal to accept my paper? So that's what they are looking for. They want, it's not just being a scientist. You must be able to convincingly present your work in terms of writing. So that's part of what they are judging, because at some point you need to write reports. You need to write for things like journal publications. So as a good scientist, it's just normal thing that you would be able to do, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally agree, Gideon. And I mean, the bottom line is we all know what impact looks like and real world impact. How are you going to move the dial? How's your research going to move the dial? That's important. And obviously we've got limited space, and I agree with you, Linus. I mean, you don't have a lot of words to put forward, but in that, and it links back to what Gideon said earlier, when the little bit of space you have, you need to be clear and precise and get your message across clearly. And you've got to convince within that 200 words the expert panel that your research really has great value, and it must be believable for us that you can do it. I mean, world peace, as nice as that would be, is not going to cut it.
Thank you very much, Duncan. We have a question from Edward. Edward, he says, would wildlife disease and subsistence farming solutions be something that would interest the panel? I think, Duncan, you could go for this one.
Yeah. Edward, absolutely. I mean, as long as it's got the lead has got a PhD, and there's strong science behind it, certainly wildlife disease, and we certainly see the value of subsistence farming. So absolutely.
And Mia Veche is asking whether you would consider a project that is more about developing a method, especially if it's a method with broad conservation real-world application, more so in Africa.
No, Mia, I mean, if it's really going to change the face of Africa and really worth, and we all know what $150,000 is a lot of money, is it worth it? And if you're really going to change the face of Africa, it's going to have massive impact, and one can show that's going to have massive impact. Absolutely. Certainly submit.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Gideon, there's a question coming from Christoph. They're asking whether the research can be inter-country. I think from your experience, you'd be able to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, absolutely, it can be inter-country. For my own project, for instance, it's cutting across all regions of Africa. I've got collaborators in practically all regions of Africa. About 10 countries or so are currently involved in the project. So definitely, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Gideon. Marie is asking whether the projects whether projects involving community engagement would be considered.
But Marie, absolutely. I mean, communities are certainly not exclusive to science, and as long as it's got a strong science base, going to have impact. Certainly, we would look at programs that are focused on community and science specifically within communities. Okay,
perfect. We had a few questions from social media. We'd just like to address them, and then we'd come back to our chat box. We got a question from Noria_TK asking what research focus areas the grant is looking at and how long the proposal or concept note should be.
Okay, well, I mean, the concept note, as we've discussed, 200 words. You know, we want to get to the core of what we're putting forward as quick as possible. And again, we've tried to keep it as broad as possible, you know, across the natural sciences. So kind of natural and allied sciences, which could be in any, you know, from plastics to water to mining to environment, across to agriculture, to across the board, as long as it fits with the criteria of the award, which obviously one would see on the website and what we've discussed in this webinar today.
Okay, and then Mariska is asking what level of study one needs to be in order to apply for the Jennifer Ward Oppenheimer grant.
As we've said, a PhD in whatever science field, and be an early career scientist.
Okay, thank you, Duncan. Malindi Msoni is asking, does the proposed research have to be housed in an academic institution?
Well, that's come up quite a bit. You know, obviously, we need to be an institution that is dealing with academia. Often, you know, affiliates to, you know, they could be affiliated to many other institutions, but the institution needs to be able to handle the funding, but we wouldn't give it to, remember, it's a science award. So it needs to be academic based. So you could be, you know, 7 years post a PhD, but within for example, a an Africa Parks, but affiliated with many other institutions and conducting solid science, then it would be considered.
Thank you very much, Duncan. We also have a question from Biranu. They're asking, is the funding only for a PhD holder or a PhD student of this year? And it's a twofold question. The other question is the fund $150,000 spent over 3 years or $150,000 each year? And there's another question from the same person. It is, how do you support female applicants in these grants? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bahanu. Firstly, you need to have a PhD. You need to be qualified and have the PhD in hand. So anyone busy with a PhD wanting to apply does not qualify. The $150,000 US, it's a once-off amount over a 3-year period. So it's not per year. We are very mindful in supporting female applicants. And in fact, a very strong applicant last year, Delia, was a female applicant. So we're certainly very supportive, and we're really wishing for a female applicant to win. I mean, Hayley Clements, our first inaugural winner, was female. So we believe that men and women are obviously have equal rights to this award. So yeah, so we're very much supportive.
And then we have a question from Alice, who's asking whether we would consider a project that is more about biodiversity and conservation, especially for the country that still has more to study about biodiversity.
Well, again, as long as it's got a strong science backing and will have huge impact. And remember what I said earlier, it has to have a big impact and big footprint. So if we're looking at the biodiversity of a park, for example, in a country, it's very narrow. I'm not taking away the fact that it's a worthwhile project, but it needs to be large in scale, replicatable, and touch. So Gideon's project, going back to Gideon, was perfect. It had a large geographic area. He had great collaborators with unbelievably a huge number of scientists within a large number of countries across Africa. It really had that expanse that we're looking for. Hayley Clements' work again. Again, she's working with every country in Africa. Again, large scale. So if it's biodiversity across a large area that has large impact with a strong science base, we certainly would look at it.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I think we'll pass on some of the questions to Gideon. I think we've been working you over time. Gideon, we have a question from Mulima asking, should the team composition strictly comprise of PhD holders?
Should the team composition? Well, that's what we would expect. You mean the members of the team, because for a project like this, we expect team members to have expertise in the aspects of the work they want to handle. I mean, to say this jokingly anyway, in academia, it's believed that if you haven't got a PhD in a field, you can't claim expertise in that area. So it's good for members of your team to have PhDs. Then you can have other PhD students and master students who will be engaged, as part of the project. But I'll recommend that members of the team should be PhD holders.
Okay, thank you, Gideon. There's another question from Anandi, and she is asking, in the concept notes, how much background should we give when we use methods specific to a field of science? For example, genetic techniques which the layman may not be familiar with.
So for your concept note, which in this case, you've got just 200 words, I would recommend that you don't write too much about methodology, to be honest. Your 200 words should be focused on the problem statement. What's the problem? And then what are you going to do to address it? And then what impact is that solution going to have? then you can talk more about methodology. You know, if you make it to the next round, then you'll be able to talk about methodology. For concept notes, it's all about the problem, the solution you are trying to profile, and what impacts that solution will make to the problem at hand. So that's what I would recommend.
Thank you very much, Gideon. Just one question directed at Duncan, and we'll come back to you, Gideon. Honest
Okay.
is asking how many concept notes an applicant is limited to.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. Well, as many as you wish, without wasting your time or ours. I would like to think that, you know, Alice, most people wouldn't be able to submit too many at this level. It is, as I say, a big program. So if you're running 2 or 3 big programs, and you think they're all worthy, by all means, submit whatever you feel fit.
Awesome, thank you, Duncan. Gideon, we just got another question from Anandi. She says, proposed projects should lack funding, of course, but would it be of benefit to show that it is a new idea that is building on solid prior research with local and international collaborators?
Sorry, can you say that again? Can you take that again?
Okay, so Anandi is like, proposed projects should lack funding, of course, but would it be of benefit to show that it is a new idea that is building on solid prior research with local and international collaborators?
Yeah, definitely. And then what I should add is the impact as well is really important. So the impact, what should add to that is now, you know, what will be the impact is building on an existing idea, but then what will now be the impact of, you know, what the project is doing? So that's really, really important. What impact will it add to the existing thing? That should be well articulated.
Thank you so much, Gideon.
Yeah.
Then we have a question for Spamandla asking, are there platforms for strategic partnerships or funding of agricultural training projects that look to investigate the sustainability of ecosystem services as an industry to ensure food security in underprivileged communities? I think, Duncan, you can go ahead and answer that one.
No, and then absolutely, and I mean, open to diversity of applications, as long as they have implications for Africa, and a strong, of course, science base to it.
And then we have a much broader question that we received from social media. Dear sir, I would like to apply for the grant. Could you please let me know the requirements?
Sure. Again, please make use of the JWO Grant website, where all grant application guidelines have been stipulated. We will add the link to the chat box, but it's www.jwogrant.kinsta.cloud, or you can contact us on jwogrant@opp-gen.com. It'll also go into the chat box.
Thank you, Duncan. We have another question from Ian, I think. Yes. Oh, he's asking whether there will be a recording of the session available to those who can't stay for the entire session. Of course, Ian, the recording will be available on the Oppenheimer Generations Research and Conservation YouTube platform. So if you just go to our YouTube platform, you should be able to access the webinar session from there. And then we have Edward Russ, who's asking a question. He's asking whether we would consider funding an individual at a commercial company that is heavily science focused. The company is focused on finding African solutions from Africa. Duncan?
It sounds interesting, as long as it's got, as I say, a PhD leading it, strong academic links, answers a real world problem. I would certainly allow that application be sent in.
Okay, and then Duncan, we have another question from Temi Top, which links quite well to what you've just mentioned. And she's asking whether she can get a PDF sample of the questions to be answered in the concept note.
Absolutely, that can be, and you can actually have a look at it if you go to the website, the JWO Grant website. It's very clear there.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Are there any more questions? I think we've covered most of the questions that were asked. we just received another question from Timmy Top. Is a researcher who's a collaborator on a current JWO grant winner project eligible to apply as a lead applicant on the 2022 JWO grant?
Well, provided it's not the same project. So if you're a collaborator on a current award-winning project, but you have a project of your own that you're the lead on, and it fits all the criteria that we've discussed today, by all means, you're welcome and would be eligible to apply.
Okay, thank you. I think this is the last of our questions. I think, Duncan, you can take over.
Okay, just again, just please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates. And that's www.instagram.com/OPPGenRC/, which I think you would see in the feed there too. So please feel free to take that forward. Is Bernard not back? Donnie?
He is not back. I think he's experiencing some technical difficulties.
Well, I apologize again for not having Bernard on the call, but thank you, Gideon. I think Gideon.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, someone's unmuted. So Gideon, thank you very much again for all your time.
It's my
I think
pleasure.
it was very insightful. And please, if anybody does have any further questions, Damaris, please could you put on mute? You're coming through on that. Please feel free to email us, as I say, on that JWO grant at opp-gen.com with any further questions, and we'll be more than happy to answer those. We wish you luck. Please, again, just remember the deadline. We really need, by the 27th of May, we need those concept notes in. And yeah, we wish you luck. And hopefully the next winner of the 4th JWO is here on the call today. Thank you so much for attending, and thanks for your time. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.